Hi, and welcome back. I'm Dave Mollison, Vice President of Vengeance International.
And I'm Doug Mollison, the President of Vengeance International. And as you can see, we've got a couple of revolvers with us today.
So today we're going to show you the basic functions, proper terminology, some common double action, single action revolvers.
And as always, we'd like to remind you that this is in no way a replacement for professional training by a qualified firearms instructor. Ready?
Yep.
All right. Okay. As we discussed in our Fundamentals of Firearm Safety video, the first thing we're going to do when handling any firearm is open the action to verify that it's clear of any ammunition. On a revolver, for instance the Smith & Wesson, you're going to manipulate the cylinder release by pushing forward, then you're going to rotate the cylinder out and check each chamber. As always, be mindful of the direction the firearm is pointed. It's only slightly different on this Colt. In this case, the cylinder release is pulled to the rear and the cylinder is rotated out. Then all chambers are checked. Some older model revolvers require a different method for opening or removing the cylinder. Now we're going to identify the parts of this revolver. Got the barrel, frame, cylinder release latch, cylinder, cylinder arm or yoke, ejector rod, trigger, trigger guard, hammer, hammer spur, grip. This is your front sight, and the rear sight is a slot cut in the top of the frame. As noted in the title, the type of revolvers we're discussing today are double action and single action revolvers. When we talk about action in this capacity, we're referring to the number of functions the trigger performs. This revolver can be fired in both single action and double action. Firing from single action means that the trigger is only going to perform one function, and that is releasing the hammer. In double action, the trigger performs two functions. It cocks and then releases the hammer. I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate. You can see that all chambers are empty. I close the cylinder. In single action, I'm going to cock the hammer myself and then pull the trigger. The trigger performed only one function, and that's releasing the hammer. In double action, I'm going to pull the trigger, and as you can see, it's cocking the hammer, and then it's going to release the hammer. Now the differences between these two are that the single action trigger pull is very light in comparison to the double action trigger pull, which is pretty heavy and fairly long. What we see in these photographs is a Smith & Wesson double action only hammerless revolver. Now, when I say hammerless, I don't mean that there's no hammer. I mean there's no external hammer. The hammer itself is hidden within the frame. The benefit to this type of revolver is that there's no hammer spur to get caught on clothing when drawing from a concealed location. Now I'm going to show you how to load and unload this type of revolver. What we have here are snap caps. These are dummy rounds made of solid aluminum with a spring-loaded primer to help protect the firing pin. They're an excellent training aid for practicing your trigger pull or practicing loading and unloading. I'll leave a product link in description below. When loading, you're going to manipulate the cylinder release latch and open the cylinder by rotating it out. Now load one round into each chamber. This can be done a lot quicker by using a speed loader, but for the purposes of this video, I'm going to do it slowly so you can see what I'm doing. Now close the cylinder and rotate to make sure that it's in the locked position. Unloading is much the same. Manipulate the cylinder release latch, rotate the cylinder outward. Now depress the ejector rod to start the ejection process. Now you can either pull these out individually or rotate the firearm to discharge the rest of them. The last thing we want to share with you is something that we see in television and film all the time that will damage your firearm. Never flip the cylinder closed or slap it closed. You might think it looks cool, but it can damage your revolver to the point that it will not function or make it dangerous to operate. Doing these things can bend or damage your cylinder locking pin and cause the cylinder to lock in place, not being able to rotate or open at all. And a non-functioning firearm is useless if needed for self-defense.
Before we finish up, we wanted to discuss a common misconception that revolvers don't have safeties. While this is true for external safeties, they do have internal safeties.
One of those internal safeties is the long, heavy double-action trigger pull, which requires the user to put in a degree of effort in order to discharge the firearm. Also, like most other modern firearms, both of these revolvers have what's called a drop safety. Now I'm going to briefly explain how a drop safety works. In this type of revolver, the drop safety is a mechanism that's attached to the trigger. When the trigger is in its forwardmost position, the drop safety blocks the hammer and firing pin from engaging the primer. You can see this firearm is unloaded. In double action, the trigger is forward, the hammer block safety or drop safety is in place and should prevent the hammer and firing pin from going any farther forward and engaging the primer. In single action, it should work exactly the same way. Now I'm going to demonstrate by placing this plastic rod down the barrel to engage with the firing pin. By tapping the trigger and allowing it to return to its forwardmost position, I'm replicating what would happen if the hammer were to disengage and slam forward. If the rod jumps, the drop safety has failed. As you can see, the trigger returned to its forwardmost position. The hammer fell, but the drop safety moved up into place and stopped the hammer and firing pin from engaging the primer.
Now remember, never rely on any safety. They are mechanical and could potentially fail, so always follow the basic fundamentals of firearm safety. If you liked this video or found it informative, please like, share, and subscribe.
And don't forget to hit the bell icon so you'll be notified every time I release a new video.
Have a great day. We'll see you next time.
See ya.